Hey, so in this lesson, we're going to talk about the five main types of lights in Unreal Engine, and those are skylight, directional light, point light, spotlight, and rectangular light. I'll explain them all in turn, and then you'll know how to use them in your scenes and what they're for.
Hey, welcome to Real-Time Workflows. I'm MX Bell. I worked on Deadpool and Wolverine, Jurassic World, Fallen Kingdom, 1917, Hobbs and Shaw, Wheel of Time, Little Mermaid, No Time to Die, tons more. What you're going to get in the channel are my pro tips and how I use Unreal Engine to make films. So let's get started. Let's make some stuff. See you down the road.
So let's jump over to this scene here. This is the standard kind of Unreal new level basic, and I've chucked a few objects in. This was taught to me by Unreal back in the day in a kind of similar way, so I'm just kind of borrowing what they did. So let's take a look here. What we've got in here are two of the five lights that we discussed, so let's tackle those first. Directional light's nice and easy, so we'll go with that one first. So directional light in an outdoor scene is basically being the sun. It's acting as the sun. So if we rotate this, we will see the shadows move, and Unreal set up to change the kind of color of the environment, and then we get to the sunset, okay, and then it goes down below the horizon, and we've got no light at all. All right. The thing to know about a directional light is it's infinite, which means that it's not actually casting light from this. If you imagine this is the direction, but if we look at that arrow, if we imagine that light actually extends that entire way forever, that's the light. It goes in one long linear line. Whereas all the other lights, or at least the three physical lights, spotlight, rectangular light, and point light, they all have a physical source. Whereas these two lights this directional light and skylight are kind of infinite, and they affect the entire scene without prejudice. It affects everything in the scene. So that's what a directional light does, and we'll get some of the settings in a sec. The skylight then, so what's that doing? Because when we lost this directional light, when we moved it down here, there's no light left. So what's the skylight doing that there's no light? Especially when we get this up here, and if I were to turn the skylight off, we can see that it actually changed, right? Did you see the change? It's got lighter. It's contributed some light, right? So why is it not contributing any light when the directional light is basically at nighttime setting, or even if it's just turned off? If it's just turned off, it's still contributing no. This seems to be contributing no light, except that when this is turned on, it does contribute light. What's going on there? Let me explain. What the skylight is doing. Skylight's often the first thing I put in, actually. It's mimicking the bounce light of the rest of the scene. It's mimicking what the way light works is it hits a surface and it bounces off. Okay, and that's difficult to do in CG without using ray tracing, which is quite memory intensive and was something we can't really do in a game engine even today. Unreal Engine does support it, but you wouldn't want to be rendering an entire scene with it, and it's best to have these kind of workarounds. I mean, even Pixar didn't use ray tracing. I don't even know what film they started using ray tracing, but I'm pretty sure they didn't even use it up to, maybe it was Cars the first time they used it. I can't remember, but like it's existed for a long time, but they still weren't using it because it just takes too long, especially back in the day. So that's what the skylight does. It's adding bounce light, which explains, actually, when you think about it, it explains why, if we let that directional light go down under the horizon, where there's now no light left, it explains why there's no light. There's no light to bounce around, in effect. Okay, so it makes sense in that sense. But it doesn't have to be that way. We can change it. So currently, the skylight is set to real-time capture, and what that's doing. This is the skylight. It's capturing at a distance from this of 150,000 centimeters. It's sampling the light, and it's going, right, okay, well, that's the light. That's what the bounce light, and then the bounce light should do what this light does. It's sampling, which is why it's kind of blue, right? Because the sky is blue. If we turn it off, it goes much redder. It's not actually factoring in this blue kind of skylight from the blue light from the sky. So what we can do though, we can change that. So currently set to real-time capture. Now that is probably, I don't think it's very memory intensive, but if you turn it off, you're getting a little bit more FPS, I think, because it's not doing that calculation it's not doing it all the time. So that's now captured it once. What I like to do though is I like to set it to a cube map, and these are known as HDRIs. You can get them from hdrhaven.com. They're really useful. Some of these are included in the Epic starter kit. So if we use this one for example, so let's have a look at this image. This is the image, and it's taking the color data and using it as light, in effect. There's also this Epic Quad Panorama here, which does the same thing. It's sampling this and it's using it as light. Now if we turn off directional light, actually we get this is actually taking effect. Now if you set the intensity to 0, now we go back to nothing, but it's set to 1. I tend to use them, but I would tend to keep them set really low, because if we just wanted to simulate the bounce light, we're not looking for it to be the only light. So now if we turn this on, we can see that we can lift this up if we want to, but it gets a bit wild. So that's it at 1. That's it at 0.1, 0.5. 0.5 is maybe nice. You get the idea. Now if we just go into real-time capture again, you can see that's what it does. That's what it thinks it should be doing. So that's fine. So it's still a little bit light there, like so 0.2 probably. Yeah, that's not far off, right? Even then. So that's what a skylight does. If we were to let's just move my sphere out here. Let's make a new one actually. So it's Alt and drag to duplicate the object. And I'm going to drop my chrome material on here and see what we get. Now because we're using the HDR, the reflections in here are actually, it's the HDR. So if we go here, now we can see we're still getting our shapes here, but what's in the background is the HDR image that we set. So if we were to change this back to real-time capture, what we get is what's in the scene. So if you're using reflective surfaces, you probably want to use real-time capture and not the quad. So if we look at this, so we don't really want that because that's not what we see. But if we didn't see any reflections and we wanted to have more control and wanted to use a specified light, or we didn't want to be using real-time capture, we could use a HDR image to get effectively the same type of thing. Okay, so that's what that does. Let's take out all of these lights and look at the 3 physical lights. So I'm just going to remove all of these, and I'll show you how to add them back in later as well. So let's get rid of all these. So now the scene's gone completely black. Let's add a light, and we'll start with a point light. It's the simplest one, so you can already see what it does. So you can think of it as a light bulb. It's an infinitesimally small, it has no area. Okay, so we'll see here in the reflection, it's just this point. Okay, so even if it gets closer to the surface that it's reflecting in, it's still just a point. It does get a little bit bigger, but it's not got any particular area. So let's look at some of the settings for it. So we can set the color. We can always set the color of the light. And the other really interesting one for you guys would be attenuation radius. So that's how much it is attenuated. Basically it's fall off. Okay. We can give it some volume by using the source radius. So we can see there, now it has some volume, and it's also, it gets bigger in the reflections now properly. Change its intensity as well, so it's, give it let it go super bright. And we can change the intensity units. If you don't know much about lighting, this is this is DOP level stuff, but you can change it to be real world light settings, or you could just be, if you just want to be sort of relatively generic, it doesn't really matter for purely for previs purposes and animation purposes. but if you were talking about doing tech viz, intense tech viz, then you want to be replicating real lights. Okay, so that's a point light. Our next one is a spotlight, and we'll see what it does. It adds a spotlight in a particular direction. Let's move it over here. So this adds a spotlight in a particular direction. Most of the settings are the same. We've got an attenuation radius, so it makes it go longer. We've got an outer cone angle now. That's a new one for this particular light. If we do this, it kind of makes it gives it an area. But it gives it an area. However, it's not an area light has soft lights. If you imagine the more pinprick a light source is, the harsher the shadows, and the bigger the light, the softer the shadows. And what a spotlight does, it is still effectively a pinpoint light, so it's still doing hard shadows. We can give it a source radius, which you see there, it's softened that shadow, but the cone angle is not what's doing that. It's the source radius. All right, and we can bring that angle back in. We've also got an inner cone angle, which we can use, and that sets the fall off. So the inner cone angle is pure light, and then the difference between the inner cone and the outer cone is where the fall off starts. So you see by the outer cone, it's completely black, there's no light, and the inner cone is completely light. And we can see here how it shows bin reflections because we gave it a source radius. We drop it back down, it goes back to the pinpoint light. Okay. Our fifth light is our rectangular light. A rectangular light has an area. Okay, so we'll see if we look over here, we can see that it's got a definite shape in the reflection. We can increase the shape using source width and source height. The bigger it goes, if you watch the shadow here, as we increase the width and height of the light, the shadow's got softer, which makes sense, right? It's a bigger light, softer shadow. We can bring it back down. And if we think about this is really good for, I like to use this for the tops of rooms, where we've got like a lot of, like in a corporate building, you might get a lot of light on the ceiling. Ceiling lamps. I like to use them for that. So I would make it a touch bigger there if we were going to put it inside here, and I would bring the attenuation radius down, and I would probably bring the intensity down as well, and we've got that kind of an effect there. Cool. Now there's one other type of light. We're going to rebuild the exterior lights in a second. So there's one other type of light before we get there, and that's an emissive light. And it's actually a material, so it's not technically a light; it's a material. I've made one here, and I'm just going to drop it onto this sphere. So what this is entirely set to green. We're going to get to the materials editor at some point in the future, but this is basically just set to green, an emissive color. So effectively what this is it's kind of a neon green lamp, and you can see the effect that it's having. Obviously we can let it spill out if we move this, and you can see the kind of softness that it's got too, because it is an area, so it has definite softness. And you can see where it shows up like in here in the reflection, which is nice. Emissive lights are more difficult to control though. Because it's a material, so you control it in a material and not in a light setting. I tend to use them for light bulbs, things like that. You know, if you've got a physical light bulb object, you can just set an emissive material to it. Either way, that's the sixth kind. So now let's look at the environment light mixer and how we use that. So we've got this scene, that's fine. Let's make it outdoors. Let's take it outside. We'll put back the lights that we deleted earlier. So we're going to use the environment light mixer. This is a nice easy thing. I can't remember which version this came in on, but it's quite nice. I tend to sort of dock things down here. And this allows you to basically create each of these lights in turn at the click of a button. So we'll see what happens as we do each of these things. The first thing we're going to do is create an atmospheric, create a skylight. Okay, so we already know what that did. Now the skylight, as we know, it's sampling in real time. Okay, so we know that's what it's doing. So it says create atmospheric light. That's actually creating the directional light. It's a little bit cheeky. It is a directional light. You can create the sky atmosphere, which gives you the blue. The volumetric cloud, as you would expect, gives you the cloud, and the height fog gives you that distant haze. All those things working together give you an outdoor scene, which is nice, and we can see what it's done to our lights. Now, none of these seem quite as oppressive as they did because there's a lot more light, obviously, and we can use these. We can always use this panel to mix our lights. We've got controls for all of them in here, so we can always use this to just mix things if we want to, or you can get to them in the traditional way. And then what I would tend to do is grab directional light, exponential height fog, not light fog, atmosphere, skylight, and volumetric cloud, and put them back where they should be into lighting. And I would probably call that skylighting. And then I would take my other lights, point light, rect light, spotlight, and I would move to new folder, and we'll call this physical lighting. Okay. Now, so those are the 5 main types of lights plus our emissive material light, which is useful, and you can see there what it's kind of doing. It's much more. If you had one of those in an empty room, it's quite oppressive. But actually, when you see it in the grand scheme of things, it's actually it's quite nice. So that's that. What we've just covered there is the 5 main types of lights, which are skylight, directional light, rectangular light, point light, spotlight, plus our emissive light, which is a material. And yeah, that's an introduction to basic lighting for filmmakers. If you have any questions, hit me up in the comments, and I'll see you on the next one.